everyone. Good morning to all. I wish you all have a good week. Let us start with a warm welcome to you to our weekly Communities of Practice Sunday check-in section for half an hour of Dharma reflection and community connections. If you are a new member to our community, please accept our wholehearted warm welcome to you. We also welcome any questions if you have any regarding to the practice and topics, and we love to help. This is customary for people in Australia to begin any meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners of our land. I would like to start today by acknowledging the Tarawa people as the traditional owners of the land on which Nantian Institute resides. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all are, and I pay respects to the elders in the past, present, and emerging. The check-in sections have been developed by our Communities of Practice team and the entire community. The purpose of these sections is to develop a reflective practice in response to changes. Guided by humanistic Buddhism, we would like to cultivate our practices and to build memorable friendships. Last week, Dr. Jonathan invited us to explore the sadness in ourselves, and today, he is guiding us to extend our insight towards the sadness of others. So our topic for today is called We Can See Sadness in the Eyes of Others. I humbly invite Dr. Jonathan to guide us to the topic.
So we will continue the theme of the wonders of sadness, a promotion of sadness, which we could call springtime in sadness, actually, or even September sadness. And in the time of springtime, at least in Australia, it's often a time associated with joy as sunshine and flowers arise, but not necessarily experienced that way. So this week we'll focus on the sadness in others and how we can detect that, often in the eyes or expression, because it's not always divulged by other people. They may be sad and keeping it to themselves, and some people don't even know they're sad specifically. So they don't always share their personal lives with us, as you can see in some of the slides being presented now. But firstly, let's enjoy a short period of reflection and meditation to set the scene. Now, that's an image of sadness. It's quite overwhelming. So with that in mind, and let that image flavor our internal world so that we can identify any feelings that we have active at present. So gently shut your eyes and let them soften and begin to relax. And within your own mind, you notice the posture of your physical body, stretching from your head all the way down to your legs and feet. Are there any points of discomfort, tightness, concern, or any focus of disquiet, however subtle? Check particularly around the face and eyes and lips and throat where emotion can reside, even unknowingly. To elicit your inner sensations, you may like to place the palm of your hand over the heart area, the front of your chest, in the middle and slightly to the left, which is a place where many emotions are stored. And you may feel your own heartbeat when you place your hand there. So within your sense of self, you may notice certain feelings, a certain feeling tone perhaps, to your mood, which may be positive. We could call it buoyant, or it may be negative, which could be sad, or neutral. And you may notice a particular mood or emotion, which may be easy or difficult to characterize. It's not always clear what that feeling represents. So it may be a mixture of feelings such as fear, disappointment, shame, or loneliness. And it may wax and wane, increase and decrease. It may seem to be superficial on the surface or deep down. And interestingly, it may be unclear whether the feeling are primarily your own or absorbed from somebody else. A little known fact, because our emotional boundaries can be very porous. And remember, if there is sadness, you have sadness. You're not a sad person. Now take your attention now to the tip of your nose, to the nostrils, where we're going to identify the rhythm of our own breath, which is spontaneous and quite wonderful. So notice the air moving in through your nostrils, sometimes feeling cool and sharp, filling the lungs, the chest rises, and then after a short pause, the air all by itself begins to escape through the nostrils, having warmed up and become softer. Eventually the lungs are empty. There's another pause, and then the next breath arises all by itself. Now, sometimes our feelings are reflected in our breath. There may be a tremor in the breath may be erratic or quick, reflecting our feelings. So now when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes and notice any feelings that may be present, perhaps a new feeling that arose during the meditation, or older feelings that you have now reconnected with. So now let's re-enter the bountiful world of sadness that we experienced last week and discover what a prominent Australian Buddhist, Professor Padma Siri de Silva, called the lost art of sadness. And on this slide, you can see some of the principles that we will be covering today, and you have a copy of that for your own record. Now, I want to present at the beginning what I sometimes call the vectors of sadness, different ways of looking at sadness, because the more we understand sadness, the more we are able to transcend it ourselves and be of service to others. So firstly, I may become aware of my own sadness and identify the sadness deep inside and treat it with due respect, curiosity, and self-compassion. Or I may be uncertain if my sadness is truly my own, or whether I'm sharing this feeling with somebody else, and perhaps it even originated somewhere else other than within me. I may become aware that someone else is attending to my sadness. I may be sad and then I'm aware that I'm being helped. I may become aware of sadness in another person and can feel the motivation within myself to respond. And this motivation may be weak or it may be strong. When it's strong, we can call it samvega, which is the feeling that was aroused in the Buddha as he was leaving the palace to begin his adventures of the inner world. Finally, I may become aware that my sadness is in fact for all sentient beings and the world itself, which we will address more next week. One example of my own that I'm sure is familiar to some extent, although all are different. The wife of an old cycling buddy who's become a dear friend, and his wife, who I will call Elizabeth, 1 year ago, during what otherwise would have been an ordinary catch-up after a dinner together, was appearing a little bit restless and agitated. Her husband had been concerned, and the nature of the conversation was warm and supportive, thankfully, in retrospect, because it created the circumstances where she was able to finally clarify what sadness had been in her, as it turned out, for some months. She didn't know where it came from, and at that moment it did. And she remembered for the first time of a stillborn child of her own from 50 years earlier, when she was young, at the beginning of her first marriage. And of course, at that time she was young, was told to forget it, to move on, not to experience grief, which was the pattern in those days. And that was so common, and to some extent today. And that had gnawed away. So she'd passed through grief, or at least grief had transcended into a type of pervasive sadness. So thankfully, we had the capacity to be quiet and patient, and then her sadness arose, and then there were profound and profuse tears. So we shared the tears. And that's all that was really necessary. She transformed into a more cheerful person after that and was eternally grateful. So there is an important bodhisattva practice of equalizing and exchanging self and others, in which we regard the sadness of others as exactly our own sadness. And we thus discover the state of interbeing, that we are in fact the other person, and thus we can generate bodhicitta, a mind wishing to attain enlightenment for the benefit of others. And we may experience anatta, non-self, even if briefly, and just as a glimpse. So as novice bodhisattvas, we must transform a vague wish to help others occasionally into a spontaneous, sincere, wise and powerful desire to be fully present. And I mentioned that spiritual emotion of samvega, to listen, to be patient, and to see clearly, sometimes called pasada, which is wise seeing, to know what to do, to mindfully notice our inner feelings, to monitor our own compassion, energy, commitment, and equanimity. And in this way, compassion can become what Roshi Joan Halifax calls generative. In other words, it increases in power and doesn't wane. We don't struggle and suffer ourselves. In fact, we become buoyed and increasingly able to maintain compassion. So the Venerable Dhammajiva from Sri Lanka said that real metta, or real karuna, is finding a reason to be glad under any circumstance. The Venerable Master says, one who truly knows how to listen, listens to the sound of silence. One who genuinely knows how to look, looks at the inner world. So we will now break into our groups, discuss the experience of sadness in other people further. Well, welcome back everybody after your breakout group discussions. So if you want to add any thoughts, words of wisdom for the benefit of everybody, please feel free to do so. I think that's very wise, using the experience of sadness to transform and to help other people, intervening before it becomes deeply negative. But it can be an unfamiliar and unpleasant feeling initially until we become more familiar with our own experience of sadness. So continue to add your thoughts and words of wisdom as they're coming through now, as they prove invaluable to other people if you can do that, particularly at this particular moment, just at the end of the session, when sadness is probably at the front of your mind and front of your heart. Otherwise, Joyce, I think it's 12:30. We may conclude this half-hour period.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. We really hope that the check-in section was helpful to you, and we hope you experience the unconditional love and compassion from this community. But for anyone who might be experiencing a greater need than what they could meet, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And you can also reach out to the professional organizations on the screen here. So we have one exciting upcoming event, which is this section. So Dr. Jonathan will be guiding us on a meditation sections on 19th of September from 11 to 12 p.m. So which is our routine Sunday check-in section. We welcome all and more friends to join us. So as we check out today, let's recite the dedication of merits together to send love and compassion to whoever in need.
Let us now dedicate the goodness of what you have done to all living beings. May kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity pervade all worlds. May we cherish and build affinities to benefit all beings. May Chan, Pure Land, and precepts inspire equality and patience. May our gratitude and humility give rise to great vows.
We will say thank you to everyone for joining us this week. So last week we were on the journey on looking the sadness within. And this week we can see sadness in the eyes of others. So thank you, Jonathan, again for preparing the beautiful slides and the topics that help us blossom the compassionate heart. So now we will have our usual post-check-in sections discussions. So please stay around if you have time. Otherwise, we'll see you again next week, 11 a.m. on Sunday. So have a wonderful week ahead. Thank you, everyone.